You're listening to Head Voice, bringing you inside the minds of the best in contemporary a cappella. I'm Evan.
And I'm Kayla, and this week we had Erin Bentlage on the show. Erin's a vocalist and composer based in LA. She currently works at Silver Lake Conservatory of Music. She's a director at Cappella Academy, and she does freelance arranging. During this episode, we talked about her background with music, her arranging style, and her experience directing at Cappella Academy.
Erin's been involved in a lot of really cool projects and has done a lot of composition and solo stuff of her own, including the song you're hearing right now, which is Easier To, which Erin has very graciously allowed us to use as our official intro and outro music, so you'll be hearing this song a lot over the coming weeks. If you want to hear the full version, there will be a link in the show notes, as well as any references made during the episode, and some links to a few other projects that Erin's been involved in. But without any further ado, this week's episode of Head Voice.
All right, well, thank you again for joining us, Erin. We're very, very excited to have you on and super stoked as a treble alum, too. That's really awesome to have you on. So I was just wanted to turn it over to you and just ask if you could just describe your musical journey and where music began for you and how you got to where you are today.
Okay, cool. So my dad is a musician, not professionally speaking, but grew up in a family of musicians. So my whole life we had a baby grand piano in our house. And when I was 2 or 3 years old, somebody had given me a book that had a keyboard on the side, those cardboard books that have a keyboard on the side of it. And inside the book, so each key had a colored dot on it, and then inside the book there was actually staff. There was actual sheet music inside of the book, but each of the notes had the color that corresponded with the key. And so without my parents realizing it, I kind of taught myself how to sight read music and would bring the book down to the piano and translate what was supposed to happen in the book onto what happened on our real piano. But I have a very vague memory of doing that, but all that is to say that I don't remember not understanding that music could happen from a page, and I don't remember not understanding that I didn't have the ability to make music on my own, which is always very able to happen for me. So that was one thing, and so that was happening when I was 2 or 3, and also when I was 3 years old, I started dancing ballet, and it was actually a huge part of my life. From 3 until 16, that was my main event, and people that I danced with went on to dance with very huge companies, and it was I quit at a moment where I was either you need to start making moves to become professional, or you want to start winding down, because there's not really an in between. But so I say that to kind of speak on the way that I understand my brain to have developed musically, which was very movement based and kind of what does the music feel like? What does it feel like? What does it feel like? And the teachers that I had at the school where I was studying ballet were very excellent and very musical, and would constantly talk about kind of the energetic line of your body, and using the full space and using the full music to make the movement happen. And it wasn't until the last couple of years that I realized how huge of an impact that had on me as a musician. So I had the piano. I started taking piano lessons, and that went kind of the classical route and the classical ballet route, so that I kind of had the 2 different chances to develop a really strong relationship with how music made me feel. And then at a certain point, I started catching on to Alicia Keys and Whitney Houston and Kelly Clarkson and Norah Jones, especially the ones that play piano, Norah Jones and Alicia Keys. At a certain point, I started realizing that I could play piano and sing at the same time, and that was really cool. That was that. And so my entire middle school life was just me by myself at home when nobody else was home, and just belting my brains out and trying to figure out how to play stuff and whatever. And then from there, then I started to realize that I could decide for my own what was going to happen. I could write my own songs. I could reharmonize songs. I could, do whatever I wanted. And then of course I was in choirs in high school, and I was part of my high school's first a cappella group. It was started by my really good friend, whose name is Laura Heberlin. And then when she graduated, she passed the directorship on to me. And that was really cute. It was me transcribing Sublime songs and trying to figure out what 3 notes were being played on the guitar part, and having really no idea what I was doing. But it was a really cool, it's just so good for you to be like transcribing music, that I think that was like really what was great about it. And then I what else? I went to a Berklee summer program, which was really huge for me. I started learning how to improvise. Like I'm from Vermont, so I did the Vermont All-State like jazz scholarship audition and got to perform as a jazz singer at the big like state festival. And then I was torn if I wanted to go to school for music or not. And so I auditioned for Berklee, and I also obviously applied for BU. And at that time in my life, I wasn't ready yet to feel abnormal career-wise. Like my parents are both engineers, and kind of my whole life it was like you go to school, you go to college, you graduate from college, and you get a job, and then you have that job, and you have a savings account, and then you have kids, and then you have a house. Like that was like what my life looked like up until that point. So I wasn't ready to let go of that. But then, so I go to BU, I joined the Treblemakers, which was like, so I don't know what I would have done if I weren't in that group. But I remember Peter Iramo, who I love. He was studying music ed, right? And so he would like be talking about like his music theory homework at rehearsal. And I was just like, what I wouldn't give for that to be my homework right now. Like what, like, you know, so that like that first year was just me like taking like chemistry and bio and like these wild sciencey classes and like not gelling with my pre-med peers and just kind of sneaking into the practice room whenever I could and like just being confused. And my mom finally over that summer was just like, Erin, I don't think that you're happy. Like she had to kind of tell me that. And then I kind of realized that she was right. And so then I like reapplied for Berklee and I got in, and then I went to Berklee and I left the Treblemakers, which was sad, but it was meant to happen.
Your legacy lives on.
My legacy lives on. It was real. I was actually very sad. I remember the like last, do you call them pitch meetings?
Yeah.
I remember the last pitch meeting that I went to, and it was like my last Trebs thing, and I just was like, oh my God, it was so difficult. But so then I went to Berklee, and I actually didn't do very much a cappella there. But obviously just because I'm a vocalist and an arranger and a composer, so between those three things, it's just as natural for me to be doing a cappella stuff. And then, I don't know, I was playing with a lot of like instrumentalists and learning a lot of like jazz and non-a cappella stuff. And then towards the very, very end, like just barely got back into it.
But that group, Introflection,
yeah,
right?
Yeah, so I was in Introflection with my friend. It was Drew Krasner's group, and he was a jazz comp major. So he was like really exploring very cool harmonic stuff and then reapplying it into the a cappella, like the medium of a cappella, I guess. And so that was really crazy. It was pretty hard stuff. And I don't think that he'd written too much for voices up until that point. So it was like a huge learning experience for him and also for us to try and learn it. Oh, yeah. I also, so at Berklee was where I met Tracy Robertson, who's one of my best friends to this day. And he was obviously in Pitch Slapped, who are phenomenal musicians and people and everything. But I met Tracy, and then through Tracy, I met Julia Easterlin. And Julia had been contacted by the people on the sing-off to put together a group. And so that group ended up being me, Julia, Tracy, our friend Anna Talp, who's like a beautiful French singer, and then Matt Salih, who was the bass for Pitch Slapped, I think until recently. And so we did the audition and whatever, and the vibe wasn't right for us. We kind of stepped out before any decisions were made because it just wasn't our thing. But that group was the first time that Tracy and I got to kind of arrange in a room together like that. Like it was a very organic arranging process. And so I think from there I was like, okay, there's something going on here. Just auditioning for the sing-off was how I got connected with Bram. So then when he was putting out feelers for Cappella Academy, Tracy was like, I think you should apply. And I was just kind of like, why would I apply for that? Like, but you know, I love Tracy. And so anything that Tracy does, I'm down to try. So I just applied, and I didn't realize, but like, I think it was pretty random that they chose me. I mean, not random, but I'm not an a cappella person. That's not really how I identify. I don't greatly identify as an a cappella person. But it turns out that my understanding is that they actually were just looking to fill in their like last spot with someone who actually wasn't as involved in a cappella as everybody else was. And so they reached out to Tracy and Julia and asked about me, and both of them kind of endorsed me. And so that's how I got the job there. And then that's been my favorite experience in a cappella, is really working at that camp and arranging for that camp and, working with the staff and all that stuff. It's really, really incredible.
So most of the time, I guess, to our understanding, you're, doing education or, sitting in with groups and, kind of doing this freelance thing. As you said, you're not mainly an a cappella person outside of academy stuff, but you are like a beautiful a cappella arranger, and we actually sought you out to do some stuff for Trebs, which was an awesome experience, and like it was really great to like see, I don't know, to see your brain on sheet music. Yeah, it was really cool.
Thank you.
And so we're also big fans of the arrangements that you've done for groups at academy and stuff like that, and you have such a distinct style when it comes to your arranging. So I was just wondering if you could kind of take us through your creative process whenever you're doing a cappella arranging stuff.
I would say the first thing that I'll say is that I have to be honest and mention that sometimes I become paralyzed in the arranging process. Like, it's not like a totally fluid thing where I just sit down for 5 hours and make it happen. There are plenty of moments throughout the process where I'm just like, it's not obvious to me what needs to happen next. And so I need to walk away.
Yeah.
And I think the thing that I've grown into well is that I now trust myself to know if I need to walk away or if I've got it. I think like when I was younger, I didn't realize the difference between those two feelings. And so I would just kind of force myself to like push through something without knowing for sure that it was what it needed to be. But so that's the first thing. My process is not linear at all. I would say that in my favorite arrangements that I've done, oftentimes it starts with me at the piano, like singing and playing with the changes. And then like usually I'll do something harmonically that's a bit different from the original. So it's kind of just me sitting there getting kind of the flow of what I want. Like, and I really like to elongate sections or shorten sections, but it's not like a mathematical thing. It's like, how does it feel? How does it really serve my take on the interpretation of that song? At the beginning of the arrangement that I did with Bram for Forte, the I Can't Make You Love Me, the beginning of the arrangement, I had gotten the idea for the beginning from just sitting at the piano and kind of like closing my eyes and just like kind of almost getting into character, like really like understanding what it would feel like to be a person who would need to write that song. And I just kind of felt like if I were that person in a bedroom, turning the lights down and making the bed and kind of watching this person that you love try and walk out of your life, I wouldn't be spitting it all out in time with like symmetrical line structure and all that stuff. I would be like kind of trying to piece together my thoughts slowly. And so that's kind of what it feels like. And so I really love digging into that aspect of arranging. I think it can be like so raw and like such a beautiful way to just like such a raw way to express ideas. And then like harmonically speaking too, I really like harmony is like, oh God, if I could only pick one element of music to work with for the rest of my life, it would just be harmony. And that's what's so cool about a cappella is that you're literally like, let's say you have 8 voices. You have 8 voices with which to create like a momentary world. Like whatever harmony you're working with in that moment is like the world that you're living in for that moment. And you have 8 voices that you can use to make those colors happen. And I just think it's like phenomenal. So it's like in the last year that I kind of have like been allowing myself to open up more harmonically, and not feel so limited by like what the original changes might be or what a typical voicing might be. Like I'm really trying to like find out what really does it for me. And it turns out a cappella is a great medium through which to do that,
right,
which is super cool. Yeah.
Yeah, it's super. Reminds me a lot of when Jacob Collier is talking about his favorite thing in music. It's like harmony.
Oh, that's
like
so
exactly
funny.
The same way that you're describing.
That's really
Yeah.
funny.
So you mentioned you've obviously collaborated on arrangements with people like Tracy and Ben. Can you just speak to that a little bit and what it's like working with another person on an arrangement?
Oh, so interesting.
Creatively, how it
works?
Works?
So Ben and Tracy, first of all, are very opposite arranging styles. I'm not even talking about the music that comes out of it, just like the way in which they arrange. I feel like I'm kind of the middle ground of the two of them. Ben is a powerhouse. Like Ben is just like, it's really incredible. He can just sit down and he just knows what he wants from something. Like he can just get it done. And I'm just so not like that. So arranging with him was really interesting because I kind of knew that if I didn't come in with a couple of ideas, he would have ideas so quickly that like my brain wouldn't work as fast as his. So I kind of sat down at the piano. I mean, he asked me to. It wasn't like I was like, oh, I better come in. He was like, why don't you, play around with it. But it was cool because we're so different that we like had to kind of talk about certain things. Like I remember there was one moment where like he wanted to use a 1 chord and I wanted to use a 4 chord. And we both were like, no, I really think it's this. And so it was just really cool. We're also, I should mention, Ben and I are really close. I lived with Ben for 2 years. So we're really, really close. It's not just like a professional relationship. But yeah, so that was really cool. But it was also just amazing to see him like he's just so focused. Like I really have a hard time focusing. He's like so focused and he doesn't feel the need to question something that works. But he's willing to question something if it doesn't work. He just doesn't which I just think it's really cool. I think a lot of creative types can get really hung up on like whether or not this is the best idea out of all of them. And I think Ben does a really good job of making a decision. Yeah, you guys know what I'm talking about. So I'm sure you do. I haven't seen it firsthand, but and then so Tracy is the opposite. Tracy and I, we arranged fairly quickly. So we did an arrangement for Cappella Academy this year. We did Too Good by Drake, and it's wild. Like it's a wild arrangement. But the reason why it was wild in the first place was because we arranged it based off of a duo version that we did where he kind of sang bass and I sang lead. But we did a bunch of stuff, like it changes keys like 4 or 5 times. And like the rhythmic motif in the chorus is just super, it's just like nerdy is the word that comes to mind, but like it feels really good to us. So we were arranging off of something that already existed. We were basically putting that into 9 voices. But with Tracy, like we were like arranging to a deadline, so I kind of wanted to like get it done. And Tracy like will not budge unless something is what he needs it to be. Yeah. Like it's just, he's like uncompromising in his ideas, which I also think is a phenomenal way to be. It's just, I mean, and that makes it sound like Ben isn't that way. Ben is also that way, but Tracy just like is really like, really digs into something and really just is unafraid to you could arrange the entire chorus of a song, but then he could realize that he doesn't like something about it, and so he's willing to change the whole thing to make it exactly what he wanted, which I think is like super cool. But arranging with Tracy is interesting because we've worked together so much over the past like 6 years, and our brains think so similarly, and I think we are inspired by a lot of the same stuff and yet also have like very different strengths in some ways. Like he's very bass and rhythm oriented and I'm very like kind of like vocal texture-y oriented maybe. I mean, he can do all that stuff too, but I think that we really bring like cool things to the table as a pair. So it's like, totally. It's like, I mean, I wish I could play that arrangement for you guys. Maybe I'll send you the demo after this so that you can hear it. It's just wild. And it's just something that like I wouldn't come up with if I were arranging by myself, which is cool. And the same thing goes for arranging with Ben. It's just very cool to like have a final product that it wouldn't have come out that way if you were working on it by yourself. And yet you had a huge part in making it. I think that's a really cool feeling.
Yeah, well, speaking of collaboration and Ben and Tracy, you're fresh off a new session of Cappella Academy this summer, which we're perpetually jealous that it didn't exist.
Oh my gosh, I know.
But what was this year like? What is it like, year to year? What do you take away from it?
It's just, should I explain what it is?
Probably. I think so, yeah.
Okay. It's an a cappella camp for high school kids, basically, age 13 to 18. And they come from everywhere in the world. So it's like open audition for anybody who wants to apply. And they have to send in a video audition. They sing like some solos and they have to do some part singing and they have to do some range exercises and all this stuff. And then out of like hundreds and hundreds of kids, we picked, I think this year we had 74 or 75 campers, which is the largest number that we've had so far. And then each camper is put into a group of like 8 to 10 people with like we kind of attach genres to them initially, but really it's just to kind of give the directors some direction with what their set vibe is going to be. That said, the genres are pretty well matched to the director. So it's kind of like, the director has their style and that's what it's going to be. But it's just incredible because the kids that we get are like, first of all, they're so talented, but they're also so excited and so grateful to be there. And it's just like everybody is so thirsty for like every single piece of knowledge or musical inspiration or just idea about like life in general, I guess. That it's just like such an incredible environment for both staff and camper. It's like everybody walks away having learned so much. And I also think that it's really beautiful because a lot of those kids are getting the chance to be in an environment like that for the first time in their lives. So they're like learning to kind of be maybe vulnerable or collaborate or realize that they're not the only ones like them at a camp of like fellow creatives and like passionate people and the vibe that we said is very like we're here to support each other at all times. So that's another element. It's just everything about it is just so well set up and then so well executed. So this year, okay, so usually Tracy Robertson is director at camp. This year he was I think he was just feeling like it's a lot of work leading up to camp if you're a director because you're arranging the whole set and making demos and it's a huge thing. So this year Tracy decided to step down from that role. And so for whatever awesome reason, the directors of camp, Ben, Rob, and Avi, decided to put Tracy as the kind of assistant director of my group, which was just like incredible. So that alone was like really special. But then also like, I mean, so it's fun, like my first year directing at Cappella Academy was like I had literally graduated from college like a month before that. So it's been really interesting for myself to see myself grow up each year. And so this year was like the most daring that I've been with my own arrangements and kind of the most grounded I've been in my own process as like a musician and as a human. So that also just kind of creates a whole different experience. But like specifically speaking about my group and kind of the arrangements that I threw at them, they were just like incredibly hard, but very much exactly what I wanted them to be. Like I was just uncompromising. Aside from I'm never going to create something that I don't wish I could change a little bit here or there. I'm always going to want to like make stuff better, but ignoring that thing that everyone has to deal with. I was uncompromising with these arrangements. And it was just so wild to like send this material to these high school kids with demos, and we get there on the first day and they're singing it back to me memorized. And this is like this stuff is like harder than probably what like I would say 90% of the professional a cappella world ever encounters. It was just like so challenging. So that was really like wild and really special for me. Another thing that was really cool is that I teach musicianship at this camp, and I was teaching the kind of like the upper level kids, and some of the stuff that they were interested in learning, like, at one point I would say, okay guys, like what haven't we covered yet that you guys want to learn? And they're asking me how to like, they're asking me about modal interchange and like use of modes and like extended harmony, secondary dominance, subdominant, like all of this like extended kind of jazz harmony that like I didn't learn about until I was in college, excuse me.
Right.
And they're just like so excited for it and like ready for it. And I just think that that's like so crazy. It's just so crazy.
I mean, it's like, it's clear watching, because I may or may not have watched all of the Cappella Academy videos, but like they like, you can clearly see a level of musicianship in those kids that like, even on the collegiate professional level, sometimes it's like not there. And like, it's not just singers, which is really cool. And I feel like it's encouraging this next generation of kids to not just be, choir kids that just happen to, get together and a thing. It's like, you can be a legitimate musician and like a cappella can be your medium if you want it to be, which I find to be super encouraging.
Yeah. Oh, I'm totally with you. I also think that the level of like arranging, like as people who are passionate about a cappella go to music school or do whatever additional music study that they are wanting to do, like the level all over the place is being raised. And I think like people like Jacob Collier and I mean, Pentatonics have been great. Like, they're just so solid and their arrangements are so well done. The current Berkeley Pitch Slapped group right now is like insane. And like that stuff would not be happening if the people involved were not very solid musicians. And so I think just the fact that like that's what people are being exposed to, I think that the people in the a cappella community are realizing like we've got to kind of start stepping it up. Otherwise, we're not going to be able to compete at that level. Not that it's about competition, but it's like for me, like the point of musicianship is not to like be so good. The point of musicianship is to have the tools that you need to get your ideas across exactly how you want them to be, you know, gotten across. So I think it's just like, yeah, I'm super excited to see what's coming up in the next like 10 years. Cause I think it's going to I think a cappella is going to go from being like, oh, cute, you do a cappella, to like, this is like serious music that's being made here. This is like not a joke. This is not something that like instrumentalists can laugh at anymore. Totally. So that'll be really cool.
So you've done a Cappella Academy a few times now, and you've had different groups. You've had Senspira, Luna, a bunch of different groups, which are all been awesome.
Yeah.
So how do you kind of, from year to year, how do you kind of put your own, not stamp, but like how do you incorporate Erin Bentlage into that group and instill certain values in the group?
In the group of kids each year? Yeah. Oh my goodness. It's so hard because like they're all so wonderful to begin with. Like I feel like I learned so much more from them than they learned from me. But I would say like the thing that's really important to me in those rehearsals is getting across the fact that what we're trying to do is not like be super excellent. Like that's not the goal of what we're doing. The goal of what we're doing is to like take these like human feelings that we have and bring them into life. Kind of bring them into a space where everyone can understand them, like tangibly understand them. I just like this year especially, like my group was like laughing at me because I was like using these like metaphors like this is so goofy. You guys can cut this out if you want to. But there's like I arranged A Case of You, which is Joni Mitchell's song. And at one point they like there's like this kind of like all these like arpeggios happening and there's all this like movement. And then it stops and then it lands on this like really warm like G major chord. It's like voiced pretty low. And the only thing that I could think of to describe it was like the feeling like when you're when you pee yourself. Like it's like suddenly really warm, you know? It just kind of like it just like seeps in around you, and that's exactly what I wanted. Because I'm really of the belief that like any idea that has any meat to it at all can be expressed through any of the senses that us humans are capable of experiencing. And so like if we're talking about music, you know, there's always like for every musical idea, there is something that it corresponds to having to do with touch, sight, smell, taste. And then from there, even, you know, there's unlimited things that it can correlate with. But what's the word for when everything like matches up? Do you know what I mean? Like
aligned,
in sync, coordinated.
Yeah. In sync.
Do you know what prosody is? Prosody is like in songwriting when the lyric matches the rhythm, matches the melody, matches the harmony. It's like everything, like the meaning. There's like an all there. Yeah, right there you go. There's like an all-encompassing like meaning behind what you're doing, and everything that you're doing serves serves that meaning. So that's really important to me.
Right.
I like
that.
I like that word a lot. I use it all the time. Something that I've felt or noticed from listening to whether it's, you know, your collaborations that you've done or your own compositions or it's, you know, arrangements for Academy stuff, is I feel like your kind of music, kind of interestingly, it kind of is a middle ground in terms of, in the same way that kind of you were between Tracy and Ben. I feel like, not saying that their music is like this, but kind of in the scholastic sphere and professionally too now, I think with a cappella, there's kind of a lot of music is living either in this super dramatic kind of brooding, dark, everything black land, or like very in your face, cheery Disney level vibe of a thing. And there's like not a lot of music that's landing in between. And so for me, like what it seems to me like what you're working on kind of like lands in that place where it's music that can be emotional and artful without going to either of those extremes, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's cool.
So I guess just for you, you kind of talked about, in your process, just sitting down on the piano, and that your biggest thing is just doing what feels right. And it feels to me like you just kind of inject whatever it is that you want to be doing creatively, whether it's song selection or, stylistically, what you want in there. So what would be your advice to groups on making something that's both unique and authentic to who they are as people?
Totally. The first thing that comes to mind, which is kind of like a side note, I guess, is that I think that it's really hard if the person who's arranging the song, if it wasn't their idea in the first place, either they have to somehow magically be as on board as the person was who pitched the song, or it has to be a song that they pitched. So I think that's a big thing. I think that it's really easy in the music industry in general to get really caught up in what people have done and what could be done and how cool something could be and what it should be. And I think that it's really important to give yourself this space to trust yourself and like trust that you have everything inside of you that you need to bring it to life, but you just have to like listen to it, kind of. You just have to kind of let yourself forget about what everyone else needs this thing to be and just try and figure out what it wants to be. I spoke with Jacob Collier about this because I was actually asking him about the project that he was doing with his Patreon campaign, where he was doing what was it called? Where he was doing
I Harm You.
I Harm You, yeah. And so I think this is what it was. And I think I was asking him, what do you do if you can't make it happen or something like that? I don't remember what I was asking him specifically, but he was just like, I can always make it happen. Like it might not be what I initially thought it was going to be, but that's fine, So he's like very much about just trusting yourself and like really truly believing that you have everything that is necessary to make it happen. But sometimes what that means is that you have to let go of whatever expectation that you had initially going into it. And that's something that I'm super, super, super still working on. But I think it's that being able to do that has led me to the best things, if you can quantify something as being best, that I've done musically. It's just when I let it happen. And usually things happen the best for me when I don't realize that what I'm doing could be something cool. Whenever I try and do something cool, it doesn't happen. But whenever I'm just like, oh yeah, well, yeah, I think this feels good. Oh yeah, this feels good. This feels good. Oh, that feels good. And then at the end, I'm like, oh wait, that's like pretty, like that feels really good all the way through. So I don't know if that answers the question very well, but.
No, totally. I feel that's so hard. We were like just arranging last week, and like one of our favorite parts in the thing that we just did was something I was just like, I don't know, like this maybe, and she was like, no, or I was like, no, and she was like,
yeah, let's try it.
Yeah.
And then it was the best thing.
Yeah, totally.
I love that.
Yeah. Tracy and I did an arrangement of this Stevie Wonder tune called Overjoyed, and at the beginning of the tune, we do this like funky little like textured like motif thing. And like literally like the way that we thought of it was just by like improvising together. And that's like the way that we do a lot of the stuff that I like the most about what we do starts from us like improvising and then just like taking a chunk out of what we improvised and like learning it to the point where we can repeat it again. And it's just like, that's like the stuff that comes the freest is the stuff that comes out the best, I think.
So sadly, we are nearing the end of our episode today. So 2 questions that we like to ask our guests are, what is one thing that excites you in a cappella that's coming up, or a trend or something? And what is next on the agenda for you?
Great questions. Next on the agenda for me is just to have a summer where I'm making music that I want to make. I haven't gotten to do that for about like the last like 6 months or so. I mean, I have, but not in any sort of routine way. So I'm really looking forward to that. I usually come out of Cappella Academy feeling like super inspired. And so every year it's kind of a challenge to learn how to like harness that inspiration into something. So that's, vaguely speaking, that's what I'm looking at. What I'm excited about in a cappella, I'm excited that people are passionate enough about it that they're willing to work really hard at it. And I'm excited to see how rapidly the quality of the music is increasing. I feel like the kids that I saw last week, some of them are just like scary. but they're not scared. They're just scary because like they don't even know that how passionate they are. They don't even know how valuable their passion is. They're just doing it because they love it. And I just think that that's like unstoppable. And so I'm just really excited that people who feel that way about anything are directing that feeling towards a cappella. And I think it's going to be really cool.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming on. We really appreciate you taking the time. And we hope that you'll join us next week for a new episode of Head Voice.